Hey everybody, it's me, Gwyneth Paltrow. I know normally these videos are very silly, with me capering about singing and dancing, doing silly limericks, but this video is going to be a little not that. It's going to be a little bleak. We're going to talk about a lot of people who get killed in war, so maybe if you're sensitive to that, skip this video. And this has been a content warning the whole time. I tricked you. You didn't even notice because I wove it in so elegantly. Anyway, preamble over, let us start the video. There's a scene in the movie Blade Runner, probably the most famous scene in the movie, where the android freedom fighter, or to use the parlance of the movie, the replicant freedom fighter, Roy Batty, reflects on the tragedy of his own death. He says this:
I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. Attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion. I watched sea beams glitter in the dark near the Tannhauser Gate. All those moments will be lost in time. Like tears in rain.
And I'm the first person to ever say this, but I think this is a very good scene. I know, I'm going against conventional wisdom here by saying that I like the scene in Blade Runner where Roy Batty dies, but I'm an intellectual maverick. I don't care what anyone thinks. I'm the original bad boy of YouTube.
It's the one and only Digo Double G.
This scene has always been really poignant to me. I mean, death is terrible for almost anyone, but for Roy, he doesn't have to die. He was manufactured to die. Someone else made that decision for him, and that's just so unfair. Sometimes media that reflects on death will imply that death gives life meaning somehow. That life is beautiful precisely because it ends. This is a major theme, for example, in the bad seasons of Battlestar Galactica. A pleasant idea, I guess, but it doesn't really make sense to me. Like, you're telling me that if you didn't have the context of knowing that you're gonna die, you wouldn't enjoy a nice painting? Or chocolate? Or sex? Because pleasure was too ephemeral. Just seems like something people put in stories because they needed to find a way to be okay with the fact that we're all gonna die someday. The fact that everything they are, everything they remember, their personality, their unique, irreplaceable themness will someday be lost, like tears in the rain. The enormity of that is unbearable. I mean, who could be okay with that? But you have to be, don't you? Because it's inevitable. And if you spend the rest of your life dwelling on it, then you're throwing away what little precious life you have left. The weight of that just comes along with being an alive person. Even if you believe in life after death, I'm sure you're not in any hurry to see it. And you'll never be sure that it's there until you die, and maybe not even then. When I think about someone dying, when I think about almost anyone dying, it's horrifying and tragic. That makes me mad and afraid and sad. And I'm not saying that like that's something unique about me. It's not. That's the very basic reaction I would expect any human being and a surprising amount of animals to have. It's a very low moral bar to clear to value human life. It's the lowest bar you could reasonably expect anyone to clear. If you can't clear that bar, it's pretty much agreed you are an evil person. And yet, our leaders and institutions not only fail to meet this ridiculously low standard, they're almost cartoonishly indifferent to human life. The United States stands on the precipice of war with Iran, a war that leaders on both sides of the aisle are pursuing with slobbering glee, with the noted exception of Bernard Hussein Sanders. I don't know, maybe elect that guy. A war that, make no mistake, was instigated for profit and self-gain. This is just the latest in a series of disastrous and pointless illegal wars to secure cheap access to the oil reserves of Middle Eastern countries. Wars that have been raging all over the region for the majority of my lifetime, at a time when the burning of oil is literally poised to end all human life on Earth. For example, 500 million animals have been killed in the continent that is currently on fire, Rather than fix that problem, the richest country in the world has decided to use its limitless resources to kill more civilians and throw more of its own young people into the meat grinder to secure their access to the resource whose consumption is causing Australia to burn in the first place. I mean, here we are, looking down the barrel of climate Armageddon, the greatest emergency that the world has ever faced. And instead of even making a token gesture towards solving it, they sneer in the face of children for being afraid for their future. The message should be crystal clear to you by now. The leaders of the state, business leaders, policymakers, media figures, none of them give a shit about you. None of them give a shit about whether you, your family, your loved ones, whether anyone outside of their immediate circle lives or dies. To them, your life is not the precious and irreplaceable blessing that it should be. Our lives are simply resources to be spent, one side of a balance sheet. Between Iraq, Afghanistan, and Pakistan, roughly 500,000 people were killed in American wars from 2001 to 2018. And that's excluding Syria. About half of those people were civilians. That's 250,000 people, or about 12 Madison Square Gardens worth of civilians who've been killed in these 3 wars alone. About 40,000 were opposition fighters, meaning 6 civilians died for every enemy combatant. Of course, this is all an estimate, because as this study notes, it's incomplete, and is an undercount. All estimates of the body counts in these wars are disputed, and I'm going with this one because it's really low. Others suggest upwards of 1 million deaths in Iraq alone. So just keep that in perspective. We don't know whether 268,000 people have died as a result of the Iraq War or 1 million. That's just where we're at, just a 720,000 person margin of error. Doesn't that seem like something we should know? Don't you think someone should be keeping track of that? Are we just going to leave that job to future scholars or whoever presides over the Iraqi equivalent of the Nuremberg trials? Okay, this is bleak. Let's take a trip to the eyeball zone. Hello and welcome to the Eyeball Zone. Given the subject matter of this video and the subject matter of the video I intend to eyeball today, I don't really want to make this a whole thing. I know normally we do the spooky eyeballs, and I don't want to do that. It feels disrespectful. A new YouTube channel called Colonialism in Canada put out a video detailing the state aggression faced at the Unist'ot'en camp, where the Wet'suwet'en people are fighting off a literal invasion and seizure of their land to build, you guessed it, oil and gas pipelines. I mentioned this briefly in my video about how white identity doesn't exist, but Colonialism in Canada does a much better job explaining exactly what's happening, the egregious violence on display on part of the Canadian state, and the greater historical context that created this crisis. If that isn't enough to earn your eyeballs, it also shows plenty of examples of meaningful resistance to state suppression and ecocide. Given what we're talking about here today, it's good to remind ourselves of what that looks like. If you have a project you'd like to see featured here in the Eyeball Zone, send me no more than one email with information and links about your project. Please include the word eyeball somewhere in the description, and also pertinent details like your pronouns, for example. The Eyeball Zone is now over. The Iraq War cost the United States about $2.4 trillion to wage. $2.4 trillion they could scrounge up to get somewhere between 250,000 and 1 million people killed. The estimated cost of halting global warming, by the way, it's about $300 billion, 1/8 of the cost of the Iraq War. That's what it would cost to save the world. About 3 Jeff Bezos' worth of money. Fucking staggering. And I know these big numbers are difficult to wrap your head around. 300 billion and 2.4 trillion seem like pretty much the same amount of money to our weird monkey brains. It's just, that's an amount that's too much for me to think about. I might as well just say a bazillion gazillion dollars. So think of it this way. If you went to a restaurant and your meal was $24, the approximate minimum tip of 15% would be $3.60. The cost of saving the world from global warming would not even be a 15% tip, the bare minimum tip, on the cost of the Iraq War. That's also putting aside all of the money spent on dealing with the effects of global climate change, which are only going to get worse over time, which is saying something, because climate-related disasters cost the world about $650 billion between 2016 and 2019. $415 billion of which was in North America alone. Doesn't even make fiscal sense to let this problem continue. Don't let anyone tell you that they're just trying to save money or it's just not in the budget. Just like it doesn't keep you safer to wage pointless illegal wars in the Middle East. None of it is done because our leaders have some grand vision, some secret information that they have to withhold from you for your best interests. They just know they can get away with shitty short-term decision-making for personal gain, with callous indifference to the brutality their policies create. How many people have to languish in medical debt or die from preventable diseases before the rich ghouls of the United States, on both sides of the aisle, stop pretending like all available evidence doesn't demonstrate that single-payer healthcare is clearly necessary? Why doesn't it stop the rich ghouls of the UK from trying to dismantle their single-payer healthcare, knowing how many people will die, get sick, or become impoverished for life as a result? All of this isn't even getting into the massive exploitation our entire global economy is based on, and the 11% of people who are starving right now. This neoliberal dystopia was always the inevitable result of capitalism. Allowing the concentration of wealth into the hands of the few at the expense of the many inevitably concentrates power into the hands of a wealthy elite. It inevitably leads to oligarchy. We, all the people watching this, regardless of where you live, we're all second-class citizens, at best. I'm sure for some of you, second-class citizenship is a lofty dream to aspire to. Under capitalism, our lives will always be statistics to the people in charge of running our affairs. We're all just collateral, and you gotta spend money to make money. It doesn't have to be this way. Like Roy Batty, we were designed to be expendable. But we can escape this capitalist death spiral. Remember, if they don't recognize the value of your life, then they're never going to expect what you're going to do with it. Hey, this one was a bit much. Sorry about that. If you liked the video, press the like button. If you didn't like the video, you don't have to do anything. That's fine. You can press the dislike if you'd like, if that makes you feel better about how much you disliked the video. You have my blessing. Please also subscribe to me here on YouTube and click the notification thing if you want to be notified when I release new videos, which I do every Friday. I also have another channel, youtube.com/scaredycatstv, where you can listen to me talk about horror movies. You can also catch me on twitch.tv/thoughtslime, where I stream every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you particularly like this video, you can visit patreon.com, where you know what Patreon is. It basically lets people pay me if they want to. Not everyone can. That's fine. That's cool. Please don't stress about it. I'm very sick and I have a sore throat. I don't know if I mentioned that at any point. I'm very sick. My throat hurts. I've had to record this a couple times. Goodbye.